Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 6:30.
WMAL.
8:07 on WMAL. We're joined now by Bob Costa, National Review political reporter. We've been talking, obviously, about the earthquake all morning long. So I got to ask you, where were you when the earthquake hit, and what'd you think?
I was actually not really nearby. I was in Chicago.
Oh, you missed it.
I missed it. I missed the news. That's where I was.
Of all the times not to be in Washington, D.C. covering politics, and you're in Chicago when we have an earthquake?
Well, I was coming back from a Midwest road trip covering these presidential candidates, so that's where I was.
Well, you missed a lot of excitement. Well, I wouldn't say it's fun, but it was a lot of excitement yesterday, at least.
Oh, I know I missed it. All those tweets, man, I was jealous.
All right, so the story this week that Paul Ryan is not going to run, despite the efforts of a lot of people in the Republican Party and conservatives who want him to run. Why isn't he going to get into the race?
Well, I spoke to Paul Ryan for a couple hours back in June about this issue, and all the issues he mentioned in this most recent statement, he reflected in that interview and many interviews before. He was never enthusiastic about it. But I think the key point for Paul Ryan was that he understood that when it came to political operations, he was really far behind all the top-tier contenders. Even though he has top-tier ideas, when it comes to operations, he just doesn't have it. He has a political PAC called Prosperity PAC. But it's a very small organization. He's just now starting to enter into Iowa and New Hampshire. And he realized that he doesn't have the ground game, he doesn't have the top political advisors to really make a late entry, something that could be viable. And as much as Bill Bennett and Frank Luntz and so many others encouraged him to run and said he could really make a splash in the crowded field, Paul Ryan, at the end of the day, realized he's a realist, that as good as his ideas are, he doesn't want to take the risk of making his ideas look like they failed because he's not organized on the ground.
Do you think he would be willing to take a role as a vice presidential candidate, or does he think he'd be more effective? Undoubtedly, okay.
I think he's very interested. I think a lot of people have been misinterpreting Paul Ryan's decision yesterday. If you talk to people in his inner circle, Paul Ryan, I think, is interested in being president of the United States someday. This is not a guy who just wants to stay in the House. Does he love being in the House? Yes. But I think he wants to shape the national conversation. He realized that now is just not the right time, and he's never in any interview ruled out being vice president. He's not going to seek it and be public about it. But this is a guy, I think, along with Marco Rubio, has a real chance and is very interested in being on that number 2 slot.
What about Sarah Palin? What do you think she's going to do on September 3rd? Is she in or is she out?
Well, she's not. I don't think she's going to be in on September 3rd. I spent a lot of time in Iowa meeting with her activists. There's a groundswell of support for her in Iowa. It's a group called Organize for Palin. And without any connection to Palin's official political operation, they are making calls. They are having tea parties. They are making blog posts and Facebook groups for Sarah Palin, hoping, wishing, crossing their fingers that she gets in. And all of them believe that her timeline is late September. And Palin, I think, is going to make a major speech on September 3rd when she comes to Indianola, Iowa. She may very much hint at a run, but I do not think, especially because her Political Action Committee posted a post yesterday saying she's not going to probably announce on September 3rd. That's not her timeline. I think late September she's going to tease for as long as she can. Her activists really believe she will run. That's all they tell me. She will run. Don't bet on the mainstream media. They say she will run. But I'm still not sure she will do that. I think she wants to be a major player, but she also, like Paul Ryan, as much as she has a groundswell of support, doesn't have much of an operation, doesn't have any top political aid working for her. So she's going to have a tough time, especially with that crowded conservative field right now in the primary. So I'm not so sure she's going to run as much as her activists and her volunteers believe she will.
Now, you were on the ground in Iowa for the straw poll, right?
That's right.
I'm curious what you thought about that. The first 3 days of attacks on Rick Perry were incredibly harsh and sometimes ludicrous, and may have formed some sort of backlash. I wonder what you think about, sort of in general, the ramping up of attacks on him, and specifically the White House response to it, to him.
I kind of see why the White House and the Democrats are worried about Rick Perry. I was at Waterloo, Iowa on Sunday when he made his first trip to the Hawkeye State, and he spoke in Bachman's hometown. And let me tell you, Rick Perry, as a on-the-stump politician in terms of shaking hands and making a convincing case on the trail, he's one of the best I've seen. It was my first time seeing him, and I came away very impressed. This is a guy who's been through tough races. You can tell he knows how to communicate his message. And he just launched immediately into the stratosphere of the race. Now, did he make some stumbles in terms of saying quotes that everyone can take out of context or pull apart? Sure. Could be a liability for him. But if you compare how he is shaking hands, how he is making an entrance, owning a stage, I know that the performance of politics is only part of the puzzle, but it's an important one, especially in the primaries. And Rick Perry is near the top, if not the best in this race, from what I can tell. And so Mitt Romney's worried, Democrats are worried. I think his Federal Reserve comments, all this stuff, I think it actually is. These are dog whistles. These are helpful things to people within the primary, like Ron Paul supporters who may be interested in supporting someone else down the line. Rick Perry, I don't think he's in much hot water as everyone thinks he is. I think he's making a strong, splashy entrance into the race, and a lot of color. Not all of it's perfect in terms of his national media attention, but I don't think it hurts someone who's making a late entry. It's making more people pay attention, and when people meet him, they think he's a pretty solid governor with a decent record, great record in terms of jobs.
We're talking with Bob Costa, National Review political reporter. We've had a little bit of a debate about this in our room right now about the impact he has on Michelle Bachmann and Mitt Romney. You alluded to Romney being worried. Do you think that Rick Perry has more of an impact on Romney than he does on Bachmann?
I think initially he has more of an impact on Bachmann. Bachmann, at that Waterloo event, they both spoke at the same event, Black Hawk County Republican dinner, and you could tell Rick Perry won the room, and that's a bad sign for Bachmann, who announced her presidential campaign in Waterloo. She's all about Waterloo in her some speech. Bachmann, I think, has to find a way to convince the more moderate wing of the party that she is more than just a Tea Party conservative. And you hear that now. Every time she speaks from the trail, she talks about how she connects the three wings, the three legs of the GOP stool: national conservatives, national security conservatives, fiscal conservatives, social conservatives. And she's making a play for the broader part of the party, not just to be the Tea Party candidate. I'm not so sure if it's working, because Rick Perry, as a governor, as someone who's run a large state, come in and really dominate a conversation the way she just cannot with her House record. So she's in trouble. I think Ed Rollins, when you hear him talking about how he's framing her, he's trying to make her like Rick Perry with a broader Tea Party message. But she's gasping for oxygen, I think, right now. She has not gotten the bump she needed off of that Ames straw poll, and it's going to be a scramble in Iowa, especially if Palin enters, or even if not, just to compete with Rick Perry for that space. Yep. And Mitt Romney down the line, I think it could definitely end up being a Perry Romney primary in a long battle, bloody brawl to get the nomination. I think as much as they think Perry's too much of a Texan and all of this to get mainstream support within the GOP, he's a big-time bundler. He's one of the most prolific fundraisers in the country. Don't count him out as being able to really cut into Romney's own space in the primary.
Well, thanks, Bob Costa, NRO. Take care out there on the trail. We'll check in with you in